Tim, I'm gonna hit the record button and start off by saying welcome. This is the weekly briefing, that time of the week where we take a break and pause and talk about what others are talking about in the industry, what's on the mind of owners, what are the hot button issues. And Tim, I think this conversation was prompted by a bunch of people who reached out to you and me and said, "Hey, what's all this? What's all this talk about proposals should be 100 pages, 150 pages? That's crazy, right? Because don't you guys recommend just doing proposals on one page?" And that, of course, just started a whole bunch of discussion and chatter and so forth. So here we are.
Yeah, I personally love 100-page proposals, actually. Joel, I think you need to focus us or whatever that thing is that you do.
Oh, thank you.
There you go.
Got it.
Yeah. Yeah, clearly, the two Bobs and their podcast, which is pretty popular for a lot of our listeners as well. And I listen to it. You obviously listen to it too, Joel. So one of the latest podcasts, they open up this idea of what makes a perfect podcast, or secrets of a killer proposal. And in that, they were mentioning, basically overkilling a proposal, just overwhelming people with hundreds of pages. And so that started an internal conversation with us of just what that means and what is a proposal and so on. So Joel, I'm gonna play host today. I think I'm gonna kick it to you. Cool. We're gonna make you answer more questions than I have to answer when it comes to this.
So I'm in the hot seat.
But yeah, be hot on this one. But let's at least start with like what we mean by a proposal. I think most of us know and have put proposals and pitches together all the time. But there's clearly a reason why you would want to include certain information and not include others. And then you're even being more edgy and saying it should all fit on one page, which seems like a different extreme.
Yeah.
So start off with that. Just what do you mean by a proposal?
Yeah. So I would say let's differentiate a pitch from a proposal from a pitch. Okay. A proposal is really what's the essence of the agreement that we're going to engage and go do a project together. So it's really a business document. It's not a creative document. It's the thing that says, here's the title, here's the project, here's the summary of what we're going to do, and then the date, the dates, the deadlines, the budget, a little bit of the fine print. But it's really just the essence of the deal. That's what I would call a proposal. But even those, it's common that studios and production companies, over time, they tend to become 3, 4, 5, 7, 10-page documents. And in my experience, that's not a best practice.
Yeah, obviously what you wanted to do in any kind of pitch is be able to get the information out there so that the client knows you've heard them and you understand what their requirements are or where they're going with their direction. And if there's any strategy or if they've written, given you any kind of written proposal to accompany your pitch, you definitely want to make sure that that's included and heard. But I think repeating that information would be one of the sins of a proposal, right? Just basically regurgitating it back to somebody as if that means I heard you. I think I get in trouble from my wife if I do that. I'm pretty sure clients don't want it the same way.
Well, I think of it this way. Proposals are often where projects go to die. And what I found is if you put a proposal together that has a bunch of information, it could be explanations, it could be descriptions, it could be method and process and all this other stuff, that will tend to confuse people, especially when you think about the bigger the deal is, right? If you're talking about hundreds of thousands or $1 million or something, that proposal is going to land on the desk of, say, a CFO or a CEO, and they're going to just be like, what is this? And I'm reading through all this, and I have 1 million questions. Whereas if the proposal simply says, here's the project, here's what we're doing, the deadline, the decision maker, the budget, right? The basic scope, just the highlight, it's like, oh, I'm not confused. I know what this is. That person might have questions, but it's not going to derail and delay the process.
So let's go to your idea of having the proposal fit on one page, right? Because I'll say, putting these things together as a producer, you think of being thorough, but you also think you don't want to miss a spot. You feel like you can feel lame or be put on the spot and feel kind of stupid if there was some big picture item you're supposed to include in a proposal and you missed it. And I know working with clients, it's one of the big panics that they have is they say, oh my gosh, I got this big RFP and it's really huge and I'm really concerned. Do I have enough in there? Did I include everything I'm supposed to include in there? So missing a big element feels like you've missed out on and could be missing out the whole project.
Well, I'll say it this way to maybe set it up. What I find works really best is if maybe you're the owner, you're the salesperson, but there's a conversation that you're having, a sales conversation with your client. And what I'll say is this: the proposal really is the agreement that you arrive at in the conversation. And it's usually verbal, like you and I are doing right now, where I would say, okay, Tim, I would be saying this. So just to summarize what we're going to do, this is the project, right? You're obviously the client, or you have a client that we're serving. What are the major deliverables, right? What's the thing we're going to produce? What's the deadline? What's the cost? And then there might be some terms, but the terms are just going to be very simple, like pay us half up front, half on delivery, something like that. That verbal conversation actually is the proposal. The piece of paper is just the thing that codifies it so that the next day when that person gets that piece of paper, it's like, oh yeah, this is what we talked about. So anything beyond that can create confusion or slow things down, or it just means you're up until midnight writing a bunch of stuff that doesn't really need to be in there to move the process forward.
And I think what you're clearly distinguishing is the difference between a pitch, which would explore different ideas, different aspects about the project, some clarity of what the marketing needs are, or what your creative direction is going to be. That pitch process is very different than that final proposal. The proposal is really the ribbon around the entire project and the experience you've gone through with your client over a few weeks, with that understanding, getting some clarity, and then how it all just kind of come together at the very end.
Yeah, and I would say this too. I like to separate sales from creative. So I don't ever want to see creative with a number attached to that creative. It feels, I don't know, dirty somehow. Like, here's this beautiful art, and now let's talk about the money. I'm thinking of a funny Simpsons quote because my partner Steve, former partner Steve, is here, but I won't go there. But I would say there's the proposal, which is a sales document, and then there's creative, which is a creative document. And they can reference one another, but I would generally prefer those be separate. Like, hey, so-and-so, hey, Tim, you and I talked about your project. Here's the specifics, right? The deliverables, the terms, the price, all that stuff. And then you would say, oh, I see this is referencing option, gold, silver, and bronze in your proposal. And you would say, yeah, that references the creative document, which is, again, boards or style frames or whatever that is. But that's a separate document because it feels like that's answering a different question and solving a different problem than the proposal is.
So let's go another place that the proposal is not and can be handled somewhere else. The legal mumbo jumbo that's involved in a project. There's a lot of long, arduous paragraphs about ownership and indemnification and force majeure and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
When you're writing a proposal, we're not really trying to summarize all of that as well either, right? We're trying to be as clear as possible what this project's about and not trying to get the whole ball of wax involved.
Yeah, because often your client is the one that's actually creating that legal contract, which is different than the proposal. Sometimes you might be the one creating that, but very often it's, in my case, I'm thinking it was Discovery Channel that would send me a legal document, and that was actually a totally different process. So I would do my one-page proposal, and me and the client would say, okay, great, we're going to do this show launch for X dollars and due by this deadline. They would take that proposal and then go to their legal team and say, hey, send a contract to Joel and his team, and here's the information you need. But that could sometimes it would take months. Like, we would finish the project, we would invoice, sure. We'd have half the money, we'd almost get the second check, and then the contract would show up. Again, I'm not advocating that, but that's when you start realizing, oh, the legal process and the agreement, the legal agreement, is actually a very different also document than the sales document and the creative document?
So I think there's an important part of proposal of the when factor, right? When should we bring up that kind of information? Because it's probably your most direct ask about the project. And I feel like if you bring it up too soon, you kind of cut short the exploration part of a project. Now, I don't know, maybe you can help me think about this. Because sometimes I feel like there's a lot of clarity about the finances when a project gets started. Some clients just award a project and say, hey, I want you to do this packet of images for me, and here's 50K to do it. And that financial component is part of the initial ask that's there. Or you might need to set up the client to say, I'm not really sure what you're looking for, but are you looking something in a $100,000 range, a $50,000 range, or a $5,000 range? Let's make sure there's clarity there. So that's really good when you're creating some of those guardrails and you get into the exploration stage. But if you do it too soon, you can also cut short the conversation, right? So what is the right time to actually be ready for the proposal, put that in front of the client, and get some sort of commitment from them of we're going to move forward and make this into a real project?
Well, I would say in a perfect world, we don't even do proposals at all. Because I can think of times where I had clients that there was so much trust, they would call me and say, hey, Joel, we got to do this thing and it's going to be on air in 3 weeks. Are you available? And I would say, what's your budget, right? They say, oh, we have $100,000. And I would say, great, we got to get started. That was the proposal.
Yeah.
Okay, so just recognize I didn't even send a piece of paper. We just shook hands and I went to my bookkeeper and said, hey, create an invoice and send first half, go. So the proposal isn't necessarily even a necessary document. So that's where we start realizing, well, what's the purpose of it? I would say the reason you would put it into a piece of paper and when you would do it is when it's necessary. When does it enable the process to move forward? So it's ultimately you're on this journey of like, you first want to qualify the client, right? Are they worthy of us? Are we a good fit? Then you qualify the project and you ask these 3 Ds, right? What's the dollars, the decision maker, the deadline? Then you want to find out, why do you think we're a good fit for this? And now you're starting to say, okay, now I'm going to give you the time and attention. Now let's talk about the problem we're going to solve. This is where I'm asking all these why questions, trying to figure out what they're, not just executing a project, trying to understand the problem, because then I can attach value to it and say, hey, there's a $200,000 way of solving it, $150,000 way, $100,000 way. Which of those approaches sounds about right for you? Again, you're trying to get all the money out of the client's pocket. Then you, of course, throw away that plan. You go to your producers and say, all right, I landed this $150,000 thing, reverse engineer it. And the client at that point might say, can you send me something that is a manifestation of our agreement? And they'll probably use the word proposal, right? They might say bid, quote, estimate, whatever, but they're just looking for a piece of paper that says, hey, can we just agree on what we talked about? And I need something that's written that is tangible that I can send up the food chain or something like that.
Yeah, you're right. It could be used as a tool, just to like, I have to make the PO off of something. Can you send me basically a pre-invoice in a way that summarizes it? I remember, we used to write these one-page documents doing exactly that. We were just summarizing, kind of like, thanks for the opportunity. What we're looking for is based off of these storyboards, and here's kind of a basic outline of where the finances are going to fall. Here's the total number. And when you're ready for engagement, send us a PO. Then it was kind of a request for purchase order / proposal. And it really, in some, negotiations or some process when you're in the pitch phase and it doesn't seem to be progressing, I find that proposal can almost be the antidote for like the deal being stalled. It's adding a lot of clarity of where you think you should go next, or asking for something specific, like, now it's time to engage us. We're no longer just going to revise and revise. Like we put it out there. It seems like we're getting along. Why don't I'm going to put a proposal together so we can commit to something.
Well, the other thing I love in that part of it, the reason that tool can be so effective is you can let somebody know, hey, by the way, here's the agreement verbal agreement that we came to. Just so you know, this like this price is valid for 7 days, which basically means, hey, after 7 days, it's like we never had this conversation. We got to start all over again. So now the client feels like, oh, I'm invested, and are we go or no go? But you can also say things like, hey, our current availability is tied to this, but that's only like in 72 hours, everything's off because we've got other things we may be getting booked onto. So this is again this idea that ironically I think it was David C. Baker that taught me this one, that this idea of your only power in the client relationship is your ability to withhold your expertise. So you start realizing, oh sure, so if I want some leverage in this, I have things I can withhold, and the client will move when I start to take things off the table and so forth. They'll move because they'll say, hey, this is valuable, we don't want to lose this.
Yeah, well said. And I like that idea of the thought of an expiration of what this project is, when we can get started, what our expected delivery is, and have a sense for the client of, you're kind of asking us to do something that is always moving down the road. So when you choose to engage and how much you choose to engage has an impact on what our company's availability is and what the price is. It really kind of gets you out of that hamster wheel of, you're only paying for our hours. We're a post house. You can come in anytime you want to. We'll charge you by the hour, and we're at any protocol you have, we'll follow. To, we're kind of in charge here. You're asking us for our expertise. Here's how we leverage it, and here's what the overall scope is going to be. So there is kind of a nice little package there. So let's. I see a couple of questions coming in, but
oh, cool.
Before we can answer the questions, let's talk about what should be in your one-page proposal. So because you're the one putting out there, like, everything should fit on a page.
Right.
Why don't you give us a breakdown of the 5 paragraphs then, or 5 major bullet points that should show up on our proposal?
So summary, okay, the client, the deliverables, right, whatever the product is that you're creating, deadline or schedule, some sort of a reference to that, the cost, and then terms. So those 6 things. And terms, I just want everyone to understand here, it's like what are the 3 or 4 bullet points that are actually tied to the verbal agreement that you're coming to. It's not all of what I would call like the terms and conditions stuff that's probably in a separate document. It's more things like, we're going to be paid half up front and half on deadline. By the way, not half on when the project is finished. Don't ever do that.
Never do that. Never do that.
And I can tell you, here is like, wait, what?
So many situations. It's horrible because the client themselves can delay the project. Therefore, your payment is being delayed along the way. So milestone delivery or date delivery, that's got to be always baked into it. So you say, hey, it's due either when I deliver this or June 12th, whichever comes first, is a way better way of putting payment structure in place than having them go. And I tell you, I've chased the last 25% way too often to say, oh, that client keeps delaying and keeps delaying. We'll never see that money. And we keep spending that money to get there. So absolutely. Yeah. Some good clarity there.
Not to mention.
Okay, so that's what the overall proposal is. Good. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, not to mention that when that date comes and the client is now obligated to pay you, they know that they're losing a certain amount of leverage over you. Like we sent them the second half payment. So now the pressure's on them. Like, we better wrap this up and stop asking for the 31st and 32nd revision, because they're not in a position to make many demands.
I always feel like the minute we give advice like this is the minute I hear all those questions that people ask of like, yeah, but my client won't allow that. How would I ask for that? I swear I hear that over and over again. And the funny thing is, and I've proven this too often, so I let's just say I have enough life experience to know this is true, that really when it comes down to it, you have to ask for it specifically. If you're not being specific in the ask, you're not going to get those results. And I think we give our clients too much goodwill, and then we try to prove that we need it instead of just being direct and asking for it. So I used to say, you don't believe me? Get me on the phone. I'll prove it to you. I don't have enough time to do that anymore, but I can just tell you as direct as possible. and as clear as possible what those demands are is the best way to get the results for that.
Well, I'm going to tell a story of when I saw you have this conversation where we were speaking at a conference and somebody in the audience was like, yeah, no, we're service businesses. You know, there's no way our clients would let us do that. We're a service business. And you just said, really? Who told you that? And it's that moment when you realize, oh, wait a minute, there's some sort of a standard that I've accepted and I never challenged it. And it's just like, well, you know, clients aren't putting guns to our heads and forcing us to do anything. So it's just like I say, look, you actually pick all your clients. You accept every deal and all the terms that go with it. So it's okay. It's okay. We all make those mistakes, but now the time is, let's do it a better way. And the reason we sell this on clients is we're ultimately trying to help them understand, hey, follow my lead here and I'll lead you to a better outcome. I know something you don't know. And if you trust me, I'm going to do something awesome for you. And you're going to later say, thank you.
Well, Ryan Summers is now going to get that tattooed somewhere. Ryan, where are you going to put that tattoo? Right there in there.
Somewhere I can see it, but nobody else can. Does that exist? I feel like on my knuckles, I just have but on my knuckles all the time. Yeah, that makes sense. But I can't do that. Yeah.
Isn't it funny?
Yeah. And I think some of what we're just, you know, we're living from a world where we're going to see multiple people behave, even with the same client, and get different results. So we're looking at best practices over and over and over again and seeing different results from different agencies. And I can just tell you, clarity is the answer. If you think you're going to go into a fight, you're going to end up in a fight. If you walk in with something with confidence, the other person feels confident as well. So to just know who you are and what you're about and what your terms are often is, you know, there might be a little bit of just some clarity, like, can you be more specific, or can we adjust what those milestones are, whatever that is. But you have a right to say, no, clearly you're paying me for a certain delivery and that can't be pushed on in perpetuity.
Yeah, the converse of what you just said there, Tim, is it's only awkward if you're awkward, right? But if you're confident, they're confident. It's the scene we all know and love from Star Wars, the Jedi mind trick, right? These aren't the droids you're looking for. And your client will be like, yeah, exactly. These aren't the droids we're looking for.
What kicked off this idea of the conversation was people calling you and kind of asking you, hey, they heard the two Bobs conversation about the 100-page deck, which if you listen to the conversation, they're clearly kind of tongue in cheek about some aspects of it. But I think they're also trying to add some clarity of what the mistakes are that we often make. And when we're asking for too much or we don't understand the process, that's where we're showing our our stripes in a way. Mm-hmm. We look too desperate, or we look too immature in our expertise. When it comes to this one-page proposal, our encouragement is if you think about a one-page proposal, we're asking you to be as clear as possible, get down those items to the bullet points you need, there's certain asks that you're asking for, but also it doesn't have to be complete. The fact that this would go on to another conversation or lead to a legal document is a great win. It gets you beyond another threshold in that deal and making that deal a reality.
Yeah, I would totally agree. You have to think of it as, and maybe it's this notion that as human beings, right, we crave certainty. Okay, so as a business owner, especially the business owner that's addicted to cash, there's this moment of, oh, I'm going to grab it all right now. Like, I'm going to create this big, beautiful document. They're going to be so blown away. They're going to love all these ideas in here. I've got all the flowery language and all the legalese that they're just going to get it and be like, wow, beautiful, and sign here. And it actually doesn't play out that way. You don't just, it's not like this big reveal and they go, oh, you're so smart, and they sign it. It's like, what is the next thing that we need to present in the conversation that's going to help them trust us and help them understand that we are indeed the expert, we're the right fit. And that's a series of documents, like you said.
So I think Matt Stevenson was kind of asking something along this line too. There are other things you want to make sure that you have cleared up maybe before the proposal stage. And he's asking about the amount of research and strategy. How do you define that? as well as like the creative solutions you're looking for, where might that be revealed before that budget or proposal stage then? Like how do you, or when would you show those items?
Well, it's hard to, of course, generalize. I would simply just say this: if it's valuable, then charge for it. So the proposal precedes that, right? If I'm doing a strategy, whole discovery and findings and presenting what our strategy is going to be, that sounds pretty valuable. That sounds expensive. So I might recommend that as a phase one of an engagement called, hey, we need to go figure out what the problems are before we even start diagnosing and prescribing solutions. So this first proposal is phase one. Pay us some money, we'll do the strategy. Then phase two will be, now we'll go figure out what the executions are or the projects once we've defined the problem.
Yeah, the trick that I've put in my head is thinking of productizing things too. So the phase one, phase two, phase three approach is really creating a product called phase one. It's the discovery stage. Stage two is a creative stage, and stage three is an execution stage. I'm just making those up, but those are different products, and you can convey your intentions to your client by using that kind of productized language and make it as clear as possible. Here are the steps you're going to go through. Here's the products that we deliver, and here's the value of those products. So you start paying us as we deliver those products to you. That sometimes gets you out of that looking for the right language or right timing.
Well, it was fun. We talked about that today, just about an hour ago with the current Jumpstart crop, because people were asking, well, what about when the client doesn't really know, right? Like they don't have a good brief. It's not airtight, meaning they don't really understand the problem. And what we all agreed was that's a perfect opportunity to offer a productized solution called, hey, let's take you through our discovery process. And it might be a workshop, it might be a jam session, whatever you name it, right? Ideally, you're naming it based on your positioning too, by the way. But yeah, that's the moment you recognize this isn't really even a project yet. I can't do a proposal for your project because you haven't defined the problem. So that's when you would say, hey, I have this productized thing called, let's do this discovery. We're going to do a brainstorm. We're going to come up with a game plan. We're going to present you various options that move you forward, and you're going to pay X for it. And we'll clearly have the defined problem and the brief on the back end of this. And that's valuable. Now the client is paying you money to basically, they're paying you for the proposal. Think of it that way. I mean, who doesn't want that? Get paid for your proposal.
Yeah, right. You're kind of hitting in the timing part of it well there too, because that's a moment when you can say, hey, I actually would be really good for us right now is to sit down and get a proposal together for you. Would you mind having a phone call with me so I can break down what the areas of the proposal will be before I put it together? And that begins that negotiating. And like you're saying, that the proposal happens in that conversation as if it's a workshop with your client to determine what the terms are going to be. They're no longer surprised that the document's coming, and it's clear why it can be a summarized picture because you spent the time defining it. But that's when you can feel the creative part of the project's going off the rails, or the pitch process is going off the rails. You can use an excuse to say, hey, I need to get you a proposal. And it'd be really great to have a time we can do that. It kind of refocuses it, creates a very kind of intermediary delivery that you can put together for them. And that really creates the beginning of an engagement.
Well, I loved what you just said there, because you're like, this is the antidote to the 12 regrettable steps where a client says, hey, I want to talk to you about a project, and you get all excited. And then you go through all these steps that later you regret when the client's ghosted you and you didn't get the project, and you're like, what went wrong? And there's that thought of, first of all, when a client says, send me a proposal, your answer should never be okay. Like ever, like, because you're making so many guesses, you'll never guess right. But if you have a conversation, right, think, what's the problem you're trying to solve, and help me understand, and is this really a project? Does it meet those 3 Ds we mentioned earlier? And if not, you just say, hey, love to help you, but this really isn't a project yet. Once you know these things, come back to me. We're happy to help. If you need help answering those questions, that's an engagement. And we'll help you define the problem and create your brief and all that. But either way, like you said, you're deepening the conversation and you're leading towards engagement. I am an expert. I can help you. I can't wait. If we're right, good fit for each other, it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, Ryan said it sounds like almost like a journalist who's saying, "Hey, before I start the interview, off the record," and you set something up. Very much, you can kind of if that's a great model you have in your head of like, yeah, let's have a conversation before the real conversation, kind of a thing.
Right.
But definitely that.
Yeah.
Just you think of the word engagement, right? And that's what you're looking for. It's funny that we use these same terms in wedding. A proposal and an engagement comes after the proposal. You get the same kind of terms here of like, before we get married, maybe I should ask you to marry me. Okay, cool. Now that we're engaged, let's talk about the wedding plans then. Let's not discuss the wedding plans before we've actually decided to get married, right? It's a very kind of similar method that we can be thinking of through this process as well.
That's great. That's great.
Well, thanks to David and Blair for inspiring this conversation. We appreciate you guys getting that out there. And we appreciate the tongue-in-cheek kind of joke that you've put out there. But you clearly have sparked some interest in that up. And I'm glad you have the one-page proposal idea. The minute you said that in our meeting on Monday, when you said, I know I'm going to call it the one-page proposal, it just struck a chord in me of like, that's just perfect. It's a perfect way of just putting that out there. Yeah.
Well, I have to give tremendous credit.
Oh, here's what Footy says. Should we still put $100 bill on the last page? That was from the podcast. Yeah, Footy. Make sure you put the $100 bill on the last page.
Well, look, David and Blair taught me a whole lot down through the years. So if anyone is not listening to the Two Bobs podcast, you're missing out. Make sure you go check that out. It's awesome.
I think you have a conversation with David coming up too on our own podcast. So
yes, we're trying to figure that out. So hopefully that'll happen soon. Well, thanks, Tim.
Of course. And if you have any questions, we're here for you. Obviously, reach out to us in Rev Community. If you're not part of Rev Community yet, you can find us at community.revthink.com. We're always available for you because why else? We exist so you can thrive in business, life, and career. That's why we're here. So we're here for you.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. It's good to have this conversation. Thanks for all the great questions. And Ryan, I look forward to seeing that tattoo in person.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. All right.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.